So today's question is private equity evil? It's not really an employment law question, but it can be, and it matters to your life. So let's talk about that. So let's just see where the question is coming from in the first place. Let's talk about the names: Blackstone, Cerberus, Bain Capital. There's one called Roark, which I believe is a Ayn Rand hero. Like the vibes are kind of evil. Darkness, war, destruction. It sounds like you're going to be smothered to death by John Galt while he sings a lullaby about how this is increasing shareholder value. It could be scary if you work at a company that's acquired by a private equity fund or firm. So I get where this is coming from, and there is a case to be made against them, right? They put Toys R Us out of business. It's like killing Santa Claus. And they acquire nursing homes and they run them in a sort of ruthless way. They're cutting labor costs. In some cases, some have argued that they're quite literally killing grandma. So, you know, scary vibes, bad stories. Yeah, I get it. There's stuff to be concerned about here. So it's worth thinking a little bit about how private equity works. It's like they're not so different from house flippers. So asking is private equity evil is a little bit like asking is a house flipper evil. I mean, not inherently, but they could be. I mean, if they're engaged in fraud or deceptive practices, if they're harming people, sure, they could be evil, but it's more, I would say it's more case dependent. But what I would also say is that there is a little bit of room for nuance here. There's nothing inherently evil about buying a company, even if you load it up with debt, and improving its operations and selling it for more money. You make the company better, you generate money for everybody, maybe you save some jobs. So it's a nuanced question, and it depends on the specifics of the situation. So a more interesting question from an employment lawyer's perspective is like, what can you expect if you are working in a company that becomes acquired or becomes a portfolio company of a private equity firm? And I would be on the lookout for certain things. One of the things they're immediately going to look to do is save on labor costs. So there's going to be potential reductions in force. And when those happen, it's an opportunity for certain actors within the company to retaliate against folks who've engaged in protected activity. So who are going to be the targets? Well, the troublemakers, people who've complained, and if you complained in a way that's protected, you could have a claim. Older folks could be targets. That could be driven by their compensation, or it could just be driven by a discriminatory animus. And along with cost cutting and a desire to save on labor, I would be on the lookout for wage theft issues. All of a sudden, are they telling you that you can't record your overtime? Are you being changed from an hourly employee to a salaried employee? Maybe you're being misclassified. So if you're an exempt worker who works for a portfolio company, I would be wondering, do I have wage and hour claims? Do I have wage theft claims? And then another big thing that I tend to see is if you're in the healthcare space, I would start being on the lookout for billing fraud against the government. Part of the equation isn't just cut costs, it's drive up revenue. And when the revenue source is the United States government, there could be fraud against the government. And if you complain about that, you might be subject to retaliation, or you might yourself have claims under the False Claims Act, which can be incredibly lucrative. So those are the general trends that I would see. I would see a concern about wage theft. If you're in a company that does contracts with the government, I would be thinking about the False Claims Act and maybe whistleblower retaliation there. And I would be on the lookout for wage and hour issues. Am I being properly compensated? Maybe bonuses that you're entitled to are cut, maybe bonuses that you're earned, even if you're not exempt, if you're salaried and legitimately salaried, not misclassified. You might have claims for unpaid bonuses under state law. I would be looking to that in Illinois for sure. So there's a lot of things going on here. Just from a nuanced perspective, they might start implementing an arbitration program. There's not a whole lot you can do about that if it's a contract that you're forced to sign or leave. But that would be a thing that I'm on the lookout for. Maybe if you're out the door anyway, maybe resign before you sign the arbitration agreement. Um, but returning to the subject of evil, I always have a little bit of a hesitation about that word evil. Like when you're demonizing others, maybe it's better to wonder where that belief is coming from. If you think of people who have money as evil, maybe that's a limiting belief. Why would you want to acquire money if you think the cost of acquiring money is becoming evil? So if you think of private equity as evil, and I don't blame you, Bain, Cerberus, Aries, I get it, the vibes are off. And there are some horror stories, but that belief could be harming you. And there's another, I would say, even more concerning issue, and this is not employment law advice, maybe it's just life advice, but maybe look to yourself when you're asking the question of evil. It's easy to say, oh, that person out there is evil, those private equity overlords are evil, but what about you? What about the evil in your own heart? I think, maybe I shouldn't be offering life advice, but I think that's always the best place to start. Look to yourself first before you demonize others. But yes, listen, if you're acquired by a private equity company, you might be about to have an employment law issue. So educate yourself about employment law, protect yourself, protect your job. Your workload is about to increase. If you have disabilities, you might be asking for reasonable accommodations. So forewarned is forearmed. But no, I don't think private equity is inherently evil.